Good evening. I'm Robert MacNeil in New York.
And I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington. After our summary of today's news, we turn to Bill Clinton's view of the world. We'll hear excerpts of his foreign policy address and discuss what he said with advocates for Clinton and President Bush. Then we review the political week and raise the curtain on next week's Republican convention with our team of Gergen and Shields. Finally, essayist Richard Rodriguez has some thoughts about where Los Angeles is heading.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. PepsiCo. Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the NewsHour is also provided by AT&T and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
The European community held another round of Yugoslav peace talks, but reported no progress towards stopping the fighting. The Brussels meeting ended shortly after the Bosnian government said it would not take part in the negotiations. Also in Brussels, NATO officials backed away from the immediate use of force in Bosnia, despite a new UN mandate to do so. The 16-nation alliance turned down a French offer to send 100,000 troops to deliver humanitarian supplies. It said it needed at least 10 days to consider the range of options. In neighboring Croatia, Serbs and Croats exchanged more than 1,000 prisoners of war today. The prisoners were captured during the ethnic battles that raged in Croatia following its declaration of independence last year. David Rose of Independent Television News reports from Osijek.
The greetings the returning Croatian prisoners received were unbelievably emotional and moving. One by one, the pale men stepped from the buses, some to be enveloped by their relatives, others to wander through the crowd searching. The men who had endured Serbian prisons said conditions had been bad. Bad food, beatings, some of their fellow prisoners killed. Most of the families with missing men had had no word from them or the Serb authorities. Their anxiety had only been heightened by the pictures and reports of the emaciated Muslim prisoners. The day had started 4 miles away at Nemet on the front line. The exchange organized by the Red Cross had been scheduled for 11 this morning. In fact, the first Croatian prisoners were returned shortly before 4. Many Croatian soldiers were there waiting for their colleagues. Buses took Serbian civilian prisoners down to the exchange point. Then the first Croatians appeared, pale but clearly thrilled to be nearly home. Once safely on the buses, they waved excitedly, giving the victory salute to everyone. On their way, they hoped, to their loved ones. Many of these families are simply hoping that a husband or a brother or a nephew will turn up. The lists are incomplete. Until the names have actually been checked, no one will know who's returned, who's missing, and who's been killed.
In Geneva, the UN Human Rights Commission today strongly condemned abuses in what was Yugoslavia. It agreed to send a special envoy to investigate reports of atrocities at detention camps in Bosnia and other parts of the former Balkan Federation. Judy?
Fighting in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia killed at least 10 people today. It was centered in the capital of a breakaway region in western Georgia. Government tanks and troops fought local militia in the region, which declared its independence from Georgia last month. The troops were dispatched earlier this week after more than a dozen Georgian officials were kidnapped. The unrest was the worst in Georgia since former Soviet Foreign Minister Eduard Shevardnadze took over as leader.
More than 150 Haitian refugees were detained in Port-au-Prince today, just minutes after they were returned by the U.S. Coast Guard. Haitian police said they wanted to question them on the possible hijacking of the boat they used to escape. They were the first refugees sent back this month under the new Bush administration policy ordering their return without a hearing. The administration has argued that no hearing is needed because most are fleeing economic deprivation, not political persecution.
3 days before the start of the Republican convention in Houston, much of the political talk today was about the strong anti-abortion flank in the party's platform. First Lady Barbara Bush expressed a contrary view in a magazine interview released yesterday. In it, she said abortion was a personal thing and, quote, should be left out, in my opinion, out of platforms and conventions. That view is counter to the official position of her husband. Vice President Quayle, meanwhile, suggested there is room in the Republican Party for both views. He was interviewed on the program CBS This Morning.
There are different viewpoints in the Republican Party on this issue. It divides men and women. Husbands and wives disagree on this issue. Families disagree on this issue. The Republican Party platform is going to remain pro-life. The President has a pro-life position. I have a pro-life position. We are not going to disinvite the pro-choice Republicans. The Democrats are the ones that apply the litmus test. They barred a pro-life Democrat incumbent governor from speaking in New York City.
About 50 anti-abortion demonstrators blockaded a Houston area clinic today. 7 were arrested. The protesters were members of the group Operation Rescue, which has staged similar protests around the country. Abortion rights activists were also on hand to keep the clinic open. More demonstrations are expected during the convention week. Governor Bill Clinton and Senator Al Gore plan to keep their campaign visible during next week's convention. Clinton aide Betsy Wright said that she expected the convention to be a Bash Arkansas party. She said the campaign would send a team of surrogates to Houston to respond to attacks. The Republicans did the same thing during the Democratic convention last month.
Top AIDS experts from the U.S. and Canada met today to discuss a recently discovered illness in which patients exhibit the symptoms of AIDS but do not carry the HIV virus. There have been 41 such cases reported worldwide. The researchers met at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta. Federal health officials rejected a suggestion from some of the researchers that U.S. blood supplies be screened for the disease. Dr. Anthony Fauci of the National Institutes of Health had this to say.
It's too early yet, but there is no evidence to have us think that we're dealing with some frightful thing, and the more and more evidence that accumulates indicates that we're dealing with something that very well might not be infectious and might not be a virus.
People shouldn't panic.
Absolutely not.
About the blood supply?
At this point in time, there's no reason to believe there's any danger with the blood supply, because we don't even know if we're dealing with an infectious agent, and in fact, the evidence indicates that we're very likely not dealing with a transmissible agent.
Officials at the Veterans Affairs Department announced today that they've begun tracking unusual patterns of illness among Gulf War veterans. A number of them have complained of parasitic infections, fatigue, and headaches. Secretary Edward Derwinski said the problems may have been caused by smoke from Kuwait's burning oil fields. He recommended that Gulf vets be examined at a VA hospital, even if they don't have symptoms.
In economic news, industrial production was up in July. The 0.4% gain reversed a 0.4% loss in June. The Federal Reserve report attributed the improvement to 2 factors: increased utility output due to summer temperatures and a rebound in coal mining after the June rail strike. That's it for the news summary. Now it's on to the Clinton foreign policy. Gergen and Shields and a Richard Rodriguez essay about where Los Angeles is heading.
We lead tonight with a look at the world view of the Democratic presidential nominee, Bill Clinton. Yesterday, the Arkansas governor opened a new offensive in the campaign, accusing President Bush of exaggerating his foreign policy accomplishments and outlining his own view of the post-Cold War world. Here is an excerpt from his address to the World Affairs Council in Los Angeles.
In their campaign, the Republicans have already tried to claim sole credit for the victory of freedom in the United States in the Cold War. And they suggest that in their second term, they will finally bring to domestic policy the same energy and expertise marked by foreign policy in their first term. This argument misreads both history and current events. The notion that the Republicans won the Cold War alone. Even more flawed is the Republican claim that just as they changed the world in their first term, they can now change America in their second or fourth. We must understand that foreign and domestic policy are now 2 sides of the same coin. If we're not strong at home, we cannot be strong abroad. And if we can't compete in the global economy, we will surely pay for it here at home. In this new era, our first priority in foreign policy and our first domestic policy are one and the same. We must revive our economy. The second imperative of presidential leadership in this new era is to reinforce the powerful global movement toward democracy and market economies. Our strategic interests and our moral values are both rooted in this goal. Yet Mr. Bush has been oddly reluctant to commit America's prestige to the side of the people inspired by America's own example. When democratic reformers sought to break up the Soviet empire, this administration at first snubbed Boris Yeltsin, sided with the crumbling Soviet center, and failed to lead the call for aid to Russia until the president was pushed into it by Richard Nixon and others. When 50 million Ukrainians sought emancipation from the dying communist empire, this administration withheld moral support, and instead, in Kiev itself, the president publicly chided Ukraine's voices of independence for seeking, I quote, a suicidal nationalism. When China cracked down on pro-democracy demonstrators, exported advanced weapons to radical regimes, and suppressed Tibet, this administration and this president failed to stand up for our values. Instead, he sent secret emissaries to China, signaling that we would do business as usual with those who murdered freedom in Tiananmen Square. And when it was clear to all that Yugoslavia was inexorably breaking apart, Mr. Bush and his Secretary of State gave short shrift to the yearnings of those seeking freedom in Slovenia, Croatia, and Bosnia, and ignored the warning signs that Milosevic was emerging as one of Europe's bloodiest tyrants. From the Baltics to Beijing, from Sarajevo to South Africa, time after time, this president has sided with the status quo against democratic change, with familiar tyrants rather than those who would overthrow them, with the old geography of repression rather than a new map of freedom. The pattern was most glaring in Mr. Bush's treatment of Iraq prior to the invasion of Kuwait, and the later failure to support Saddam Hussein's opponents after the success of Desert Storm. The world remains a dangerous place, though the dangers are now different and less apparent than in the Cold War. So as we scale down our military, we must also keep up our guard. United States military strength will remain a force for stability and justice as the old order continues to collapse and a new one emerges. We can never forget this essential fact. Power is the basis for successful diplomacy, and military power has always been fundamental in international relationships. So a president must provide the American people with a clear explanation of our enduring security interests and a new estimate of the threats we are likely to face in the post-Cold War era. So far, in my judgment, this administration has failed to supply that rationale, failed to give a clear strategy for a new national security, and that is fueling isolationism here at home from both the left and the right. Today, there are two wrong-headed and dangerous approaches to adjusting our defenses for this new era. One is the administration. It talks of strategic change, but basically simply shrinks the existing Cold War force structure. Continuation of this policy runs the risk of weakening the two elements that were absolutely critical to our victory in the Gulf: our superbly trained and motivated personnel and our world-class weapons technology. At the same time, there are those, some in my party, who see defense cuts as largely a piggy bank to fund domestic wish lists, with our defense structures and missions as a mere afterthought rather than a starting premise. This policy would also weaken our technological superiority and the quality and morale of our superb personnel. Leadership demands more than a Cold War minus or domestic spending plus approach to the defense of this nation. A president must identify the new threats to our security, define military missions to meet those threats, adapt the forces to carry out the missions, and back up the forces with the training, technology, and intelligence necessary to prevail. We must start with a fresh assessment of the new dangers that could threaten our interests and potentially require the use of force, including the risk of new threats from former Soviet republics should democracy fail, especially before all the nuclear weapons have been dismantled. The House Armed Services Chairman, Les Aspin of Wisconsin, has put it right. He says the administration's base force plan leaves us with a military that does not fit our strategy and cannot do what we ask, burdened with redundancy, lacking flexibility and mobility. Just as you don't shoot gnats with a howitzer, we can't always respond rapidly and flexibly to far-flung regional conflicts with forces designed primarily for warfare in Europe. In other words, we must not merely decide how much force we need, but we must design the right kind of forces. Our new military must be more agile because with the end of the nuclear standoff, new battlefields will likely be dominated by maneuver, speed, and outthinking the enemy. That is why, for example, I support a technology this administration has tried to cancel, the V-22, because it is the only aircraft capable of certain special operations, including the rescue of Americans deep in hostile territory. And as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Dave McCurdy of Oklahoma, has said, we must have superior intelligence to know where to apply force with the best effect. And we have seen in the last 2 years the lack of intelligence and the price it can cause. The Clinton-Gore defense budget brings savings of about $60 billion over the current Bush plan through 1997, very close to the numbers recommended by Senator Nunn and Representative Aspin. But our efforts must go further. I agree with Senator Nunn that it is time to take a fresh look at the basic organization of armed forces. There is today no serious plan to help our defense workers and military personnel to make a transition to a civilian economy. I have such a plan. For example, I support incentives for military personnel to earn military retirement by taking jobs as teachers and police officers, as Senator Nunn has suggested. I want to help retrain defense technicians for work in critical civilian fields, such as biotechnology, renewable energy, and environmental cleanup. The ultimate test of presidential leadership, of course, goes beyond defense budgets or battle plans. It is the judgment a president exercises in the perilous moments when countries are invaded, friends are threatened, Americans are held hostage, and our nation's interests are on the line. When the American people choose a president, they want someone they can trust to act when those moments arise. Every president in the last half